So the story begins with Inanna and this moan inside, this deep sort of nagging moan that won't it won't leave her. And even though she's got a really good life, she's queen of the upper world, she is, for all intents and purposes, everything is okay on the surface, but something won't leave her alone, this moan. And so Ereshkigal, her sister, has been in exile in the underworld for a long, long time. And everybody behaves as if that's normal, as if Ereshkigal just should be there. Like, she's queen of the underworld, that's where she belongs. Where else should she be? But for Inanna, there's this sense of something missing, something she's split from. And so she decides that she's going to descend. She's going to go to the underworld and meet with Ereshkigal. But before she goes, really importantly, she calls in her Ninshaba. Ninshaba is like the handmaiden of the feminine. She's like a midwife. She is the witness, the beholder of the descent. And she says to her, I'm going to go to the underworld to see my sister Ereshkigal. If I'm not back in 3 days, please bang the drum for me. Set up a lament in the assembly places. Go and find help. So she calls in this witness for her descent, which I feel is that's what the midwives do. That's what we do when we're going to birth. We call in a midwife, we call in a witness. So she goes to the underworld and she tells the gatekeeper of her intention to enter. And the gatekeeper goes to Ereshkigal. And Ereshkigal is absolutely infuriated with the fact that Inanna thinks that she can just come and visit. And so she says to the gatekeeper, let her descend if she wants to, but she will come naked and bowed low. So there's this sense that she's going to be both stripped and humbled. And so the gatekeeper takes her to the first gate, and the first thing that's taken is her crown. And she just says, what is this? She's the queen. People don't just take things from her. And the reply comes, quiet, Inanna. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned. So she goes to the next gate. And at this point, her lapis beads are taken. And again, she says, what is this? And once again, the same reply, quiet, Inanna. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned. And so she continues to the third gate. The same thing happens. Another object is stripped from her, and she keeps asking the same question, and the same reply comes. So there's this sense of, these are the rules of the underworld. They may not, they are absolute, and she can't question them. So she goes down through the 7 gates until she goes to the 7th gate, and her robes are taken, and she's completely stripped naked. At this point, she's feeling exceptionally vulnerable, and she looks up, and there is Ereshkigal, her sister. But Ereshkigal is not up for a loving sisterly reunion. And so she takes a stake, and a meat hook actually, and she stakes Inanna and hangs her on the wall to rot. So meanwhile, above ground, Ninshaba is getting increasingly worried. Inanna has not appeared. And so she starts to bang the drum, she sets up a lament, and when that doesn't help, she decides to go for help. And she goes to the sky gods for help. Now, the sky gods are very well known in our modern day world. They are on their throne. They don't like to associate with the dark feminine. They like the order of things, and they don't like it to be rocked. So when Ninshaba appears at their door saying, Inanna's gone to the underworld and she hasn't returned, please can you help? The answer is no. The underworld isn't a place for a woman like her. If she's gone there, then she deserves to stay there, basically. And so she tries another sky god, please, please, will you help your daughter? She's in the underworld. I need to help her return. No, those who go to the underworld do not come back. That's the way it is. And we are not interested in helping. So Ninshaba soon realizes that she is knocking on the door of the wrong gods. How many times in our lives do we do this? And so she's about to give up. She feels complete despair, and she thinks, oh, there's one more place I can go. So she goes to find Enki. Now, Enki is a soulful sky god. He's a gardener. He's not afraid to get his hands into the earth. And as soon as he sees Ninshaba, he says, what's wrong? The empathy is there straight away, his concern, his love. And she explains, Inanna's in the underworld, please, can you help? And he says, of course. And so he pulls out the earth from underneath his fingernails and creates two little creatures, a Kugara and a Galatur, and says to them, go to the underworld, travel under the gate like flies. There you will find Ereshkigal. She will be making birthing sounds. Give her your empathy and basically ask her for Inanna, help Inanna rise. So they do this. They fly down into the underworld, and sure enough, they arrive there. And Ereshkigal is making these sounds. And after her rage has come up, she starts to feel her pain. So she's saying, oh, my heart, oh, my belly, oh, my back. And they say, oh, your heart, oh, your belly, oh, your back. And they empathize. They just reflect back. And after a while, she says, who are you? She hasn't had any empathy. She's not used to being heard. And she says, if you are gods, I will give you a gift. What do you want? And they say, we only want the corpse of Inanna. So she gives them the food of life and the water of life. And this allows the birthing rivers to flow. And Inanna starts to emerge. As she emerges, she's flanked by these two Gala demons. They're there to once again check that in the rising that the rules of nature essentially are upheld. So as she emerges, as she is rebirthed, she's asked to make a sacrifice. And once again, motherhood, we do have to sacrifice some of our old identities as we rise. So motherhood or any other rising will always include a sacrifice. And the first person she comes across is Ninshaba. Ninshaba falls at her feet. She's so relieved to see Inanna. And the Gala demons try to take Ninshaba, and Inanna says, no, she has been my witness, my midwife. I will never sacrifice Ninshaba. They go a bit further, and then her sons come, and they too fall at Inanna's feet. They hug her. They're so delighted. The demons try to take her, the sons, and she says no. They continue on, and then they meet with Dumuzi, Inanna's husband. He is laying in all of his finery on Inanna's throne and is acting as if he hasn't even noticed she's been gone. And for that reason, she knows that he is the one who must be sacrificed. But Dumuzi is not, again, he's got a lot of sky god in him, so he slithers off and hides, and so ensues a whole saga. He goes to his sister and basically says, please, will you help me? Inanna, she's the embodiment of compassion. She's the last character in this story. And Inanna goes to Inanna and appeals to her not to sacrifice Dumuzi out of vengeance or anger, like misplaced anger, but can she find compassion? She asks Inanna to be compassionate. So Inanna finds inside of her this solution that actually Dumuzi, as an embodiment of the masculine, will go to the underworld for half the year, and then Inanna will go for half the year, and Dumuzi will get to rise, so that the masculine and feminine enter this cycle of death and rebirth together, so that both can continue to be renewed and descend and rise as many times as needed to keep bringing the gifts of that wisdom that we get from our descent and rising to be rebirthed as many times in a lifetime as is needed. So I guess I've answered the question as I've told the myth to an extent, in the sense of the way that that birth takes us down into the underworld and strips us of our identities. It reveals parts of ourselves, I think, that we don't know. And even if they're parts that we did know before, we get to know them in a whole new way. We get to know ourselves in a whole new way, but also life in a whole new way. And I really love the Sylvia Brinton Pereira, a Jungian analyst. She names that the 7 gates are 7 chakra points in the body. And so I really feel like birth really does that. It pulls us out of our head, down through those 7 gates inside of our bodies. And then in my own experience of birth, birth then comes through that open channel. So I really love that we call it giving birth, in the sense of the descent is a surrender, and actually in the end she submits. There's a submission point there. And for me personally, to feel that submission in my own body, like when my first daughter was born in particular, there was this sense of absolutely submitting to the birth coming through the vessel of my body. I couldn't have stopped it if I'd tried. It would have been completely impossible, and nor would I have wanted to, because it just felt so amazing, actually. And you know, there is no stopping. You just are. Like, submission is all encompassing. And so I feel like when you touch that, you're never the same again. And if you behold that, I don't think you're ever the same again either, perhaps. I know that it definitely changed my husband's life. And then the rising, how do we live after that? How do we parent this new human being? How do we relate to ourselves and reintegrate back into our lives that won't ever be the same again? I feel like it's such a vulnerable shift. And I love this idea that when you birth a baby, you also birth the mother. You birth a part of your beingness that wasn't there before. So it's such a powerful and vulnerable part of our aliveness, I feel. And I find that, I think when I had my first daughter, I didn't have this map. I only met the Inanna myth after I'd birthed both my daughters. And I was profoundly changed by birth, but I don't think I had a mythopoetic map that really spoke to the stripping I experienced and the vulnerability and bewilderment. And I really love that word as like be wild-ment. Like I was rewilded through birth in some way, and it was quite an initiation to find out how to walk back into life in that, from that place. I think it took many, many years of integration. I don't think it was a quick process for me, and perhaps isn't a quick process for any women, though we are encouraged to snap back in modern culture very quickly. I really like that this map gives us a framework to really consecrate birth as, and the motherhood journey as, an initiation, as something that needs to be tended to, midwifed, witnessed, held. And I feel that's very sadly we've lost, but we are quite estranged from that in Western culture.